It's time for Real Talk with Brian and Dan, the weekly talk radio show dedicated to discussing important real estate topics, plus insight into the local community. With a combined experience of over 50 years as local real estate brokers from the East Side Real Estate Team at Keller Williams Realty Bellevue. Here's your hosts, Brian Levitt and Dan Edwards.
Good afternoon and welcome to Real Talk with Brian and Dan on 1150 KKNW. It's Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. We're so glad you're joining us today. In addition to listening to us on the radio, you can also see our YouTube channel. Look up the Eastside Real Estate Team. And you can also listen to past episodes anywhere there are Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe. And finally, all of our past episodes are going to be uploaded to our website at the eastsiderealestateteam.com. We are so glad you joined us today. We have an exceptional cast of members, as you can see on our broadcast today. We're excited to talk to Gloria Chien with VIS Designs and also Johnson Marshall of the Johnson Marshall Agency. But before we get to our guests today, let's start out with some real talk. So Brian, a lot of things kind of going on with virtual tools.
Right.
Obviously, we're sitting right here on a virtual item. What are buyers looking for right now in order to provide a higher level of service in the current environment?
Well, it's interesting because we're doing so much of our work remotely now. We are doing in-person showings, but on a very limited basis, one broker, one buyer at a time. But we're really finding ourselves leveraging a lot of the tools that we've used for a long time. We're just doing it, we're doing it better. I mean, example is our virtual tours, our 3D tours, and now even doing virtual open houses where we will schedule an open house just like we always would, but instead of buyers walking through, they reach out to us and schedule a time for a tour on FaceTime or any of the other, video conferencing tools that we're using our iPads and our phones to walk through, show the buyer through the home in real time.
Well, I think what's been transformative, is in the past, if I had a buyer that was new or relocating to the area, it might have been more of a challenge for them for us to meet, right? Because somebody would be flying in for an interview or a second interview or signing around for a job. And then after that, they'd want to meet with somebody to kind of get some information, but they weren't able to really get the feel of people. Now we can actually do one of these Zoom calls. We can meet, ask a lot of questions. One of the things that I like to do is fill what we call an intake form, a buyer's intake form. So as a new buyer, there's a lot of questions that you have. Some people know a lot about what's going on in the market. Others are just learning. So we really want to know what the starting point is. So before meeting with any buyers, I send out this intake form. And what I ask the buyers to do, if it's a couple and they're buying a home together, is we ask them to each fill it out separately. Like no collaboration.
Right.
I just want you to give us the information. And you'd be surprised, Brian, the different answers we get and how it sparks some controversy, but really does encourage a good conversation as to what it is they're looking for. So we use that buyer intake form. Why don't you talk about a virtual buyer's presentation? How do we do that?
We're doing that as a shared screen on, typically a Zoom call where we can walk through the entire process, answer questions real time, and go into some pretty good detail. It's a really great educational tool to really, I view that as one of my most important roles in a real estate transaction is educating my clients. And so it's a really good tool because it's interactive. We can discuss in detail all of the ins and outs of the transaction. What's your experience been, Dan?
It really is show and tell. And I think even before the crisis, we would sit there and be looking at a computer together. So now it was easier to pull up the data so that we could show the data, bring up homes together, search together. And I think, Brian, you also mentioned now with our new Keller Williams website, people can actually schedule virtual tours.
Right.
So after we've gone through this whole process, the virtual tour, there are a couple of different ways to do a virtual tour. And I think the first one you mentioned are 3D Matterport tours, right?
Right.
So for our somebody that doesn't know what that is, kind of describe what the Matterport tour is.
It's a tour that you have, when I've done it, I've used my mouse to literally walk through, or I shouldn't say literally, virtually walk through, using the cursor to go room to room, to be able to pan left, right, up, down, and just go throughout the entire property at my own pace, looking in detail at the things I want to see. It's a really amazing technology.
Yeah, and if there's anybody out there watching and they want to learn a little bit more about this, I'll be hosting a virtual open house on Friday, 5 o'clock, and we'll be walking through a 3D tour. I think anybody can do that, right, at their leisure, whenever they like. But it's a little different if you do it in a format where you're actually being guided with an agent walking you through. Because, Brian, I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, look at this house. It's another thing to say, well, how does that relate to maybe a property that like located next to a park, right? Some
Right.
of the intangibles, the agent intangibles.
Looking at the details, I did a virtual open house with a client recently. Well, they purchased the home, but I mean, example, we used FaceTime, and as I'm walking through, they're asking questions. Remember, one of the buyers really wanted to see the kitchen cabinets, so opening the cabinets, each one, and describing what I'm seeing while they're looking at the video, and did that in real time. So I think it was really helpful for them to be able to really closely look at the things they wanted to see.
Yeah, and I think a final point is we talked a lot about buyer tools, right, in this environment, because a lot of people thinking about that. But I want to express to any potential sellers out there, these tools obviously that we're talking about serve you, but most importantly is that the data that we get. So, I can look at any of the advertising that we've done out, and I can show you how many impressions led to clicks, and how many clicks led to actual leads. So we're able to really target and get some feedback in real time what your level of activity is. So we don't have a whole lot of time to go into all the other tools for sellers, but those are some things that we start out with.
Right.
So that's it. That's the end of our segment. So I appreciate the conversation, Brian, of course, as always. If you're interested in this topic and any other Real Talk segments, you can find them on our website at the eastsiderealestateteam.com/blog. Look for the tips. And any specific real estate questions, you can reach out to us directly at 425-200-4093. Thanks for listening. Coming up next, we're going to be speaking with our lender for our Mortgage Moment segment. After this commercial break, we're going to hear from Aram Maravosov, thank you, and experienced loan officer with Movement Mortgage. So more Real Talk right after this short break.
It's time for our mortgage moment.
Oh, time to come back. All right.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the show. You're listening to Real Talk with Brian and Dan.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Dan. It's now time for our Mortgage Moment segment. And this is our segment where we feature one of our mortgage partners sharing with you direct insights on what's going on in the market today. Today, it's Aram Maravosov. Whew, it's so hard to say. Aram, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Aram, given the current situation with the pandemic and financial markets, is it harder for a borrower to qualify for a loan these days?
It is not necessarily the case. As long as they're employed, still working and receiving paycheck, nothing really changed procedurally. We're still doing verification of employment and such. The only thing that got added is that we shortened the verification of employment period from 10 days prior to closing to 5 days and do certification 48 hours prior. Some lenders actually want verification of employment on the day of funding. We don't do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal. But
that is different. Yep.
But overall, we're still looking at income and everything, and if people are still employed, nothing changed really.
So go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead, please.
What credit scores and down payments does Movement Mortgage your clients need to have?
Yes, Movement Mortgage has FICO requirements of 620 minimum for FHA, conventional, VA, USDA. Depending on the program, investment property requires higher FICO, but overall, we're doing 620. Down payments are still the same. If people qualify, they can do 3%, 5%, 3.5% for FHA, or 0 down for VA and USDA.
Yeah. So what are you seeing in the market now in terms of your purchase pipeline? You seeing it, what you typically see this time of year?
It is busy. Actually, while many suspected that market will die out, and there are some people who thought that prices will plummet and they're waiting for a bargain. My message to them is don't wait. Prices are actually very stable. And not only that, as a lender, I see multiple offer situation where homes are being sold over asking. It is brutal there. We're going against 7-8 people competing, and people are overbidding. So nothing really changed. It didn't slow down, and interest rates are also low. And
do you mind me asking where they're at right now?
They're in the low to mid threes right now,
Wow.
depending on the program. But yeah, they're pretty much in threes, and so very affordable, historically low. And so I encourage people, do not wait, see for prices to plummet. Seattle market is still strong. You're not gonna get that. It's not gonna plummet by and you're missing out on savings, potential amortization, equity gain, and things of that nature.
So with the bidding going on, are you seeing problems with appraisals?
No, appraisals are not coming in with problems, and they're priced reasonably, so I don't see any issues there.
That's great news.
Finally, from your vantage point, I would like to know, are aliens real? Are you seeing any aliens out there?
I'm not going to comment on that. I'm one of them, so I'm not.
That's funny. Well, you saw the Navy films that they released, right?
No, I actually didn't. I read about it, but I'm like, I'm too busy originating.
Too busy originating.
Too busy. That's good.
Yeah, helping with pre-approvals for purchases. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to worry about aliens.
There we go.
That's awesome. Aram, we appreciate your input as always. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. Next up after the break, we are going to visit with Gloria Chien of VIS Designs, who will be talking about the 5 key factors for the success of your commercial tenant improvement project. For your commercial tenant improvement project. Stay tuned right after this short commercial break. Welcome back. You're listening to Real Talk with Brian and Dan on 1150 KKNW.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Dan. Our first guest today is Gloria Chien of VIS Designs. Gloria Chien has a bachelor's degree in architecture from Washington State University. She practiced architectural design for 10 years prior to her 14 years of interior architecture and interior design. Her practice is mainly in commercial tenant improvements and occasionally home remodel. With 24 years of experience, she's passionate about creating outstanding designs for office spaces, restaurants, retail stores, medical clinics, and probably more. Her services include branding, space planning, finish and furniture selection, lighting design, permit documentation, and permitting. The goal of her company, VIS Designs, is to enhance the success of her client's business. Gloria, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, listen, we like to start out before jumping right into business. We always like to start out to bring our theme in, which is, home is usually linked to some of our most fond memories. So we'd love for you to share with our listeners and those watching on Facebook today a fond memory of the home that you grew up in.
Well, I'd love to. I grew up in Taiwan. So Taipei is the capital of Taiwan. It's very similar to New York City. The density and then almost everyone live in a condominium, like high-rise buildings. So downstairs are retails and shops and movie theaters, and then maybe 3rd or 4th floor up are the residential homes. And we just love it. It's just very convenient. Most of the people take transportation, public transportation. So, and the real estate market over there is pretty hot, and the price, the house prices are very similar to Seattle. So it's very competitive.
Gloria, what does your design process look like?
Well, when I meet the client for the first time, I will go to the site and see their space. Then I will set up like 2 or 3 design meetings. So I will spend some time in my office and doing design. And then I'll show them either on the video conferencing for this pandemic time, or I will meet them or email them my design. So it can be a floor plan or elevation. And then we talk back and forth for 2 or 3 times. And then when everything is settled, then I will start to produce construction drawings or permit drawings. Then I submit the drawings to the city for permits. And what I expect from the clients is they tell me what their visions are, their wants and needs, and their time frame, and also the budget for the construction. So then I will design from there.
So it sounds like you handle the soup to nuts of any tenant improvement, right? So everything beginning. How complex is the permit process, and how aware are you of, say, the permit process in Issaquah versus Bellevue versus Newcastle versus Sammamish?
Yeah, the permit process is really, there's a basic, so the city will, when they take your drawings, they'll spend like maybe 4 to 6 weeks to review. Right now, if the staff work from home, it can take a little longer. And then that's for the second review, and then they will either give you the permit if there's nothing need to change or modify, or they will give you city comments. For every city comments, the architect will need to respond. They'll need to change and then submit again, and they will take them 2 to 4 weeks to respond again. So that's how complex. And then in terms of the cities, every city is different. Seattle, Bellevue, Issaquah. My experience is Seattle and Bellevue, they're actually not so difficult. Seattle can take longer time because more people live in Seattle and work in Seattle. And the smaller city and sometimes can get very difficult. Yeah, for example, Issaquah is very difficult. So yeah.
And we mean that in the nicest way, Issaquah.
What are key factors for the success of a commercial project?
Actually, there are, so first of all, it's the location.
Okay.
Which city, that relates to the city
Yeah.
jurisdiction, which city your space is in. Issaquah, it might take a little longer time. Seattle, Bellevue, each city has a different way to deal with them. Depends on the architect's or the designer's experience. And the second one is time. How much time do you have from now to your grand opening date? And I highly recommend start as early as possible, because the time can be 2 to 3 times more than what you think. And then the building code knowledge, the design professionals, building code knowledge really is a big point, a big factor. If they know the building code, they can discuss with the jurisdiction more efficiently. And the last one is the heart of the person, the designer or the architect. If this architect is really the advocate of his or her clients, and then that will make a huge difference on your time frame, and also the things that you need to provide for your space according to the code requirements.
So that's a really cool factor. I didn't really think about that, but actually owning the project and being that strong advocate, that's super important. And when I think about what you're talking about with design with regards to a workspace or a restaurant or something like that, a lot of times those are reflections of the company and the passion that the company has. So that's really cool that you put that in there. So as we're talking important factors when it comes to leasing a commercial space, so things are changing right now, right? I mean, there's people working from home, working in different places, yet there's still going to be people that need a space. So what are some of the important factors that people should consider?
Yeah, the first one, that's most common one, is the leasing terms. Are they triple net or not? That's very important. So the broker will explain to you. And the second one is the landlord standards. For example, if they allow you to select your own carpet, or to select your own paint colors. Some landlords don't, and it's always white walls, always green carpet, no matter if you like it or not. And then the third one is the location. Again, that's which city. The city and the jurisdiction is a big factor. Some cities, it can take you 7 months to get a permit. Some city only over the counter, the same project. So it really depends. And then
it sounds like you help people with that, with kind of deciding not all those criteria. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I have experience with one project that the other architect that they interviewed said that your space is in Seattle, it takes 7 months. And when I came in, I said, I don't know, maybe not necessary. Let me take a look at the plans and talk to the city. And it came up just over the counter. So I saved the tenant 7 months. They can open the business earlier. And then the last two factor is the space planning and the jurisdiction. So the space planning is when you have 2 or 3 locations in mind, you really need a designer or architect to come up with the space layout for you, because that's really code related, the building code related. You might think I want the office to be here and then break room to be there. Yes, you can, and then but maybe we need to twist a little bit according to the building code requirements. Yeah.
So I understand it's the time frame is largely dependent on the jurisdiction, but in terms of you doing your part of the project, what kind of time frame does it take for you to do your magic?
Okay. Yeah. So for me, if the space tenant improvements usually is 2,000 square feet to say 4,000 square feet, and then it takes me at least 2 months. If it's a small size, and maybe 6 weeks, so say 2 months for design, and then another probably 2 months to 3 months for the city review or comments, so 2 to 3 months, and then another probably 2 months for the construction. So you're talking about at least 6 months, 6 to 7 or 8 months. So if you're thinking about leasing a space in September, you really need to start right now.
That's interesting. That's great. Well, okay. And that's typical, is you're saying 7 to 8 months is pretty typical?
6 to 8 months.
Oh, 6, I'm sorry. 6 to 8 months is typical.
6 to 8 months, pretty typical.
So what about budget? How do you ensure that the budget, that what your client has allocated for tenant improvements, and that you stay within that budget?
Well, that's right here in your experience and your heart. So when I select the materials or do design, I have the client's budget in mind right in the beginning. So I've seen some other professionals or some other people's project is towards the end is, oops, we are over the budget, $20,000. Sorry, we need to cut here, cut this. You can't have this, you can't have that. I really don't like that. So right in the beginning of my design, I put that in mind, and then I select the materials and do the space planning for them in order to save time and save the money for my clients. The material you choose still can be high quality and achieve the same result. It's just a different manufacturer, and then sometimes it can become even cooler, much better than what you originally think.
What advice do you have for a customer to choose the best architect or designer for their commercial project?
Yeah, first of all, the experience of the architect or designer. If you have a commercial project, I highly recommend they are experienced in commercial projects more than residential projects. And also they have experience in your type of business. For example, offices or clinics or retail or restaurants. And then the second one is the skill set. Does this person, architect or interior designer, have experience and knowledge and skills in both architecture and the interior design? because for tenant improvement projects, these two really go together. You cannot have just experience in interior design or architecture. You really need both, because you're dealing with not just the aesthetic part, the nice looking, but also the mechanical, electrical, and the structure, walls, those things. Yeah, and then their reputation and their personality. If they are detail oriented, your project most likely will be very successful.
Makes
Gloria,
sense.
thank you. The picture behind you, what is that? What project is that you're working on?
This one?
Yes.
This is an apartment building, new construction, 7-story high. My role is for all the interior, including the lobby, amenity room, fitness, and all the units. This one down here is the dentist's office, similar to dentist's office, and plus a lab at the back. This is their lobby area.
What project are you most proud of?
Most proud of? There's a lot. Currently, I have a project, brand new office building in Issaquah. So it's a 4-story high office building under construction, scheduled to finish in this summer, August. And then that's my most proud project, and I team up with another architect. And so you're welcome to visit after the summer.
That's the one Gateway?
No, it's a Popular Way office building.
Oh, nice.
Cool. Let's see, what else we got? All right, so should I hire one company to do architectural permitting and another one to do interior design, or a company that can do both?
Well, if it's possible, I highly recommend you hire a company that can do both, because that will save the client's money and the budget. Because when you hire two, you need to pay this person this amount and pay that person that amount. But when you hire just one firm and that can do both, you actually, their design fee wouldn't be as much as when you hire two companies.
So how do our listeners or those watching get a hold of you today?
Well, they can go to my website at www.vis-designs, which is plural.com, or they can call me at 206-335-4199, or they can email me, Gloria C at vis-designs.com.
Awesome. Gloria, thank you so much for coming on today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Gloria.
All right, after the break, we're going to be visiting with Johnson Marshall, who'll be sharing with us the ins and outs of home insurance. Come right back after this short commercial break.
Welcome back to Real Talk with Brian and Dan on 1150 AM KKNW. I'm Brian.
And I'm Dan.
Our next guest is Johnson Marshall of the Johnson Marshall Agency. Johnson began the Johnson Marshall Agency in 1999 after moving here from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Johnson built his agency from scratch, leveraging relationships in the mortgage industry. Johnson has enjoyed many successes and accolades in his career, including multiple Toppers Achievement Clubs, Legion of Leaders designate commercial elite status, certified insurance counselor, and 4-time recipient of the Farmers Unsung Hero Award. For many years in leadership at Habitat for Humanity, Johnson is father of 3 and grandfather to 1. When not working or occupying his life with all things kids, Johnson is an avid golfer athlete. Welcome to the show, Johnson.
Thanks, nice to see you all.
Hey, we like to ask each of our guests to share a fond memory of the home they grew up in. What do you got?
I wasn't prepared for that question, so I'll tell you that I guess the fond part of the memory is that I grew up in a multi-generational home. So my grandfather lived with us, and we were a large family with 6 kids, and so just a lot of great family memories that way. A real privilege to grow up with my grandfather in the house, and we grew up in a neighborhood that was really cohesive. So as I grew up, those families really became my extended family, and still are to this day. But when I first read the question, I read it as what was my strongest childhood memory, and my strongest childhood memory is that I set fire to my own house when I was a kid.
Oh no.
Whoops.
So I burned the whole ground floor of my house when I was, I think I was 6 years old. So it's no small coincidence that I've ended up as an insurance agent as an adult.
You got an
So-
early education, huh?
Yeah. Now you say you burned it. What did you light it up, or was it an accident?
It was an accident. Yeah. So we had this paper banner that ran across the whole basement that was from a party, you know, where everybody drew these caricatures. And I don't know where my fascination with fire had come from, but I would go down and I'd light the corner of it and blow it out. And after I'd done this a couple of times, I thought I'd show off to my 4-year-old sister, and I took her down and I turned out the lights and I set it on fire and I let it burn a little longer for effect, and then realized I couldn't blow it out. And so here I had this piece of paper that went all the way around the entire
Oh
basement.
no.
Just lit the whole place up. You could see my house on fire from all over Vancouver.
Oh,
Wow, that is a first about
Yeah, top that one.
former arsonist turns insurance agent.
terrible.
So Johnson, share with us insurance, and what is the Johnson Agency all about? Johnson Marshall Agency all about?
Well, we like to put a focus on, you'll hear a lot of this in the insurance business, but we'd like to try and put a focus on knowing our clients and understanding what their needs are. Insurance is something that has really been commodified over the years, and people have started to a greater and greater extent treat it as just something that you have to get the best price on, period. And what I really try to emphasize with people is that insurance is a large part of any household's budget. And as such, you want to spend those dollars wisely. It's not about getting the cheapest price. It's about getting the best value for what it is that you're spending all those dollars on. If you have a claim, you don't want to find out that you've got cheap insurance or that you've cut a corner here or cut a corner there. And the only way to do that is to know your client, for your client to know you, to make sure that you're going through a proper evaluation of everything and selecting really what you need.
So one of the questions that comes up when we help a buyer buy a home and they obtain a mortgage, the lender requires that they have homeowners insurance. And a question that I often hear is why is the coverage less than what they paid for the home? Can you expand on that for us?
It's the most common question I get as well. And the shortest answer is to simply say that you're buying a house and land, but you're insuring the house. So in my industry, for many years, home insurance was simply called fire insurance. And the whole purpose of it was if the house catches fire, you want insurance in place to replace it. And most importantly, the bank wants insurance in place to replace it, right?
Right.
So your land does not burn up and go away. So how we arrive at the insured value of a home is we take all of the characteristics that are publicly available. So, the number of square feet, how many stories, how many bathrooms, quality of features, those sorts of things. And they all go into an appraisal program that's designed for the insurance industry. That is by and large the same as the appraisal program that's used for the real estate industry, except we don't include a factor for the land. Okay.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, there is another item that is often added there, and that's the earthquake insurance. Does everybody need that, or is it just people down in Southern California?
Well, that's a subjective question, but my informed decision is that everybody should have it. We live in the third highest rated catastrophic earthquake zone in the United States.
Wow, third?
Third, yep. So next to LA, and there's a place up in Anchorage, but they don't have the same sort of density that we have here. I've been in the insurance business for 21 years. I have never heard a professional speak on the matter of earthquake insurance that they haven't used the exact same phrase, every single one of them. And that is, it's not a question of if we're going to have a big earthquake here. It's simply a matter of when. And so, from my standpoint, everybody should have it. I like to tell my clients that insurance is about two things. It's about catastrophic loss. And yes, catastrophic is going to mean different things to different folks. But when it comes to a big earthquake, that's going to be catastrophic for everybody. And the second thing is that insurance is about sleeping at night. So that's where the subjectivity part of it comes into play. And that is that some people can put their heads down and say, I'm comfortable knowing that I don't have earthquake insurance. But the biggest thing that I find is that people make what I call non-decision decisions. So all insurance, it's not a very sexy thing. It's not like buying a new car. It's not like buying a new house. It's not like buying something new and exciting for yourself. And so when they are talked with about earthquake insurance, as often as not, people's reaction is to say, I'll think about that. I'll make a decision next year, those sorts of things. And what they don't realize is that they're making what I call a non-decision decision, because you've really decided not to do it. Instead of, making a decision, either you want it and need it, or you don't want it or don't need it.
So Johnson, when one of your insureds suffers a loss, what's the point where they should or should not file a claim, and why or why not?
Well, it's really all about math. Most of us have learned the hard way when we were younger that you don't want to file a claim for every little car accident ding that you have, because you file a claim for something small and your insurance goes up and it ends up costing you more than if you'd just gone out of pocket to take care of it. And that's really the truth of all insurance claims, is that you want to take a look at them and say, is this catastrophic? So as I said before, catastrophic means different things to different folks. I've had some folks that have had $30,000 losses and they've said, we can afford to take that, and they don't file that claim. I've had other folks that have had $800 losses and say, I just can't afford it. So they have to file the claim. So catastrophic is going to mean different things to different folks. But the most unpleasant conversations that you can have with people is when they file a claim and then they find out that that claim is costing them more in the long run. Right?
Wow.
So, I don't operate, my industry doesn't operate in a vacuum. There are all kinds of factors that go into determining how my industry works. But at the end of the day, it's all about profitability. We're in this business to make a profit. And bless you.
Thank you.
And, sometimes it's about how the market is returning. Sometimes it's a factor of how losses are aggregating for the industry. But there are times when my industry is more profitable and less profitable. And when we're less profitable, we have less of an appetite for risk. So you all in the real estate business will remember 2001. 2001 was a terrible year in the homeowners insurance market. And you'll remember that it became such a problem to get insurance on homes that they started to write it into the purchase and sale agreement.
Right, I remember that.
People had to have insurance in place before the purchase was finalized, right? Because it was torpedoing deals. Back at that time, I use as an example, I had a client that filed a claim with another company. They non-renewed him for filing the claim. He came to me, and the only carrier that we could get charged him thousands of dollars more a year, and he didn't have a choice. He had to take the insurance. So over the course of 3 years, it was in excess of $10,000 that one claim cost him.
Wow.
So that's an unpleasant conversation for anybody to have. So you always want to make sure that you understand the math of it, right?
Right.
That's right.
Now, another kind of surprise could be something that isn't covered. So what are some of the most common things that homeowners assumed was covered but wasn't?
Well, I'm going to choose my word carefully here, but when we have that big earthquake, that's going to be the single biggest thing that's not covered. I mean, most people don't carry earthquake insurance, and it's the biggest problem that I think that we have coming our way here. But independent of that, probably the single biggest thing that's not covered is water. All homeowners insurance policies are by and large the same. We're written off of the same skeleton, and then different companies will put little tweaks and little bells and whistles, but as a general rule, we all operate on the same structure. And so what you'll find is that you're covered for what's called sudden and accidental discharge of water. That means a pipe burst. And what you're not covered for are things like water intrusion or leaks. So it's a really common thing for somebody to call me up and say, hey, we were doing a remodel on the bathroom and we pulled the bathtub out and oh my gosh, there's all this rot underneath and I need to file a claim. My contractor tells me it's going to cost us $15,000 to fix this. A leak is something that's easily determined by examination because you'll see that the wood has rotted over an extended period of time, that there's discoloration to the wood and mold and all those sorts of things. Leaks, water coming in from a crack in the window or from a faulty roof, those are the things that are not covered, and I get those questions all the time.
Wow. What are the biggest changes you've been seeing since coming into the business?
My business is radically different from the day that when I came into it. The things that people will be pretty familiar with is that, there's been the introduction of the use of credit, and customers hate that. The insurance commissioner is not too keen on it, but it is one of, if not the single biggest predictor of loss in this industry, and this industry is about predicting loss. So that's a big one. The use of algorithms has changed it a lot, so that it's a lot harder to determine, where somebody's rate is going, because it used to be that it was tables, and I could literally and easily look at the table and say, well, okay, this factor is going to affect your rate this way. Nowadays, they're much more complex than that, so it's harder to predict the future for the client. And then the last thing is what I call the Geikification of the industry. And I sort of talked about this before. It's being beaten into everybody's head all the time that, give us 15 minutes and we'll save you 15%. But when I take a look at those policies, I see sacrifices and reductions in coverage that people didn't even realize that they were making. And to their peril. Those are short-term gains and long-term losses.
Johnson, tell our listeners and viewers how to reach you.
I have the world's easiest telephone number. It's 425-990-9999. So you can reach me there anytime that you need. You can also reach me by email. It's JM for Johnson Marshall at insmatters.com. That's JM at insmatters.com.
Johnson, thank you for coming on the show today. Really appreciate your insights.
Great to join you guys. Thanks so much.
Remember that all the segments of our show are available to watch on our YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about any of our guests, please subscribe. Join us after the short break for some final thoughts and something fun to do. We'll be right back.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Real Talk on 1150 KKNW. Let's get into your final thoughts of the day, Brian. What do you got?
Okay. Yeah, you bet. So you've heard me say this before. I'll say it again. Dan, there's never been a better time to buy.
It's true.
I'm closing one tomorrow, 2.75% interest rate. That's as closest to free money I've ever seen.
That's so good.
As a buyer, you get less competition right now than I've seen in a very, very long time. We're still seeing multiple offers, but a little bit of a break, so a little bit of a chance to have better selection of inventory. As a seller, there's still high demand. So as a seller, it's a great time to sell. Prices have not dropped. And as a buyer, you've got a little bit of better opportunity you've had in a while, and frankly, the best rates I've seen in my career. Period. So
I think it's important to understand that, Brian, you've been through quite a few of these
ups and downs.
Yeah, yep. And for you to say this, and I know you to be a sincere person, it's really important. So now we've got a couple more ideas for you quarantine folks to kind of sharpen your skills. And the first thing I would say is, hola, me llamo es Daniel. Okay, so
there you go.
Learn a new language, sign language, French, Spanish, whatever you want. You can just go to YouTube, actually. Learn an accent. That would be fun, right? Good eye, Mike.
Yeah, work on my Canadian.
Work on your Canadian, right? A boat. Hey, bless you, a boat. All those good things. So
Zed.
Oh
Okay.
my gosh. Well, listen, Brian, you want to wrap it up?
You bet. That concludes our show for the week. I especially want to thank our guests, Gloria and Johnson, for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you all for listening. And before we go, I want to share this quote. Some people look for a beautiful place. Others make a place beautiful. Enjoy your week. Stay well. Looking forward to sharing with you next week.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And thank you guys, guests, for being on.
My pleasure.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everybody.